I'm Courtney Fallon, and welcome to The Game Plan on Reach TV, your insider guide to this week's key NFL action. In The Game Plan, I tap into the Believe Podcast Network to bring you the most important information you need to know to stay in the loop. We are just weeks away from the opening day of NFL free agency, and this offseason, we will see a number of big names move to new teams. To go over all of this big news that you need to know, I'm joined by Taylor Davis from Believe in Everything Auburn. Taylor, welcome to the show. Are you ready to play 3 and Out?
Oh yeah, love it. Let's do it.
Okay, first down. Should the New York Giants franchise tag Saquon Barkley? And if not, where do you see him going?
Gosh, this is a tough one, and I never thought we would be in this conversation. I fully thought Saquon Barkley was going to retire as a Giant. He's been very clear about wanting that. I think the writing's on the wall. They're not going to pull the trigger on this one this year. Unfortunately, we did see a little bit of a regression in his performance this past year, and as crazy as it is to think of Saquon in a different jersey, I do think he's going to explore his options. I think from a business perspective, the Giants are not going to sign him to the franchise.
Well, I think that it would be very interesting if he hits the market, because you know how much those running backs garner, and I don't think anyone else really deserves the big bucks other than Christian McCaffrey. All right, second down. Do the Bucs let wide receiver Mike Evans walk, or do they sign him to a new contract?
I do think that Mike Evans is so important to this franchise. Look, this guy has been a pillar of consistency through everything that this, franchise has gone through, the good and the bad. You've got 10 years with the Bucs, at least 1,000 receiving yards every season. Who the heck can say that? Yeah. I don't know, though. I think he's so important to this franchise, to this fan base, and with a lot of up and down as far as what Baker Mayfield's future is in Tampa Bay as well, I think it would behoove that front office to lock down a guy like Mike Evans.
Could not agree more. I think we talked about it a number of times on this show. He has to stay in a Tampa Bay Bucs jersey. Third down. What team that missed the playoffs this year has the best shot to make the playoffs next year?
I am so on the Joe Burrow train. I just think this guy is such a special talent. We see it physically on the field, obviously, but mentally and his work ethic, I even think a guy like him having to endure that injury and sit out the way he did, you're going to see another level of Joe Burrow unlocked, if that's even possible. They've got to figure out what's going on with T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd, both set to become free agents. Yet take care of Jamar Chase, give him that big extension that he has certainly earned. But my money's on Joe Burrow. I think that this team is certainly going to be one to watch, and they'll bounce back quickly.
I love all of that information. And I will tell you this thing. He's got the X factor.
100%.
My bonus question. We always have a bonus question on 3 and Out. What is the return the Bears should ask teams for if they're trying to sell Justin Fields?
I think it's reasonable if they ask for a second round. I personally think any higher than that is a little bit of a reach, just given some of the inconsistency. But personally, if I'm the Bears, I don't really see where the Caleb Williams debate brings in more allure than what you've got in Justin Fields. And Caleb Williams could potentially be Justin Fields 2.0. So I don't really see why you risk that. But if you ultimately choose to do so, I don't see them getting anything other than a second round.
Okay, thank you, Taylor, so much. Next up, we are discussing the top free agents available this offseason. Don't go anywhere. Free agency opens up on March 13th, and to go over what big names will be hitting the market, I'm joined by Patrick Chiotti from the Let's Ride podcast. Patrick, welcome to the show. Let's dive into your top of the market free agents. I'll let you go first. Since this is your list, I do have a copy of it. What do you got for us?
Obviously, the quarterback position is the most important in football. Kirk Cousins is just the name that everybody is wondering, where is this guy going to land? Minnesota is kind of putting out all the signs that they might not be bringing him back. He's going into his mid-30s. He's coming off a very serious injury, but he's still playing at such a high clip. Whatever team is willing to give him that contract and give him that commitment for next season or 2 seasons is going to be very happy with their investment. He's at the top of my list for sure.
He can still sling the ball even as he turns 35 years old. Second one on our list, Mike Evans. Could Mike Evans not be a Tampa Bay Buccaneer anymore.
I mean, this is another guy who's getting up there in relative football age, but he's still playing, again, at such a high level. I feel like Tampa Bay is going to do everything they can to keep both Mike Evans and Baker Mayfield because that was such a good tandem. But I think with teams needing wide receivers, Mike Evans is probably going to be looking for somewhere where he can really get back to the Super Bowl. He can get that big payday and be a part of a really great team.
I would love him in Detroit. Just please, let's put the vibes out there. Just don't let the rich get richer. Okay, the third on your list is going to be a hot defensive end free agent is Daniel Hunter.
Yeah, this is going to be a guy who's going to command a huge market in free agency. I think he's one of the better players at that position. There's going to be other names at the defensive end, edge position that are going to be big, but I think he's going to be one of those guys that's going to be highly sought after, and he's going to command top dollar on the market.
Fourth on your list is Josh Jacobs, running back from the Las Vegas Raiders. A little, hot and cold with that team.
Yeah, I think Josh Jacobs is not being talked about enough as a free agent option among running backs. This is one of the better running backs in the league. Maybe Vegas tries their best to keep him. I don't know how they're looking financially, but I think he's going to go where the money goes, and I don't think that's in Vegas.
Last on your list is Tyron Smith, offensive line in Dallas. Listen, does he keep his star in Tyron Smith, or does he let him walk?
He's getting older. Like you said, the draft picks have been hitting, and this is a fantastic draft for offensive tackles. Where they're sitting right now in that latter part of round one, you could probably still get a really great offensive tackle prospect at that area. And so you can probably let Tyron Smith walk. There's going to be some teams that need left tackle help. There's going to be some teams that are looking for a veteran presence to help that offensive line. I think that he's probably not in Dallas anymore.
Certainly also the teams that pull in these draft picks that are young, you also need someone like Tyron Smith, a veteran, to set the tone and set the pace, because there's an acclimation period for these rookies coming to the NFL. Patrick, thank you so much. We appreciate the insight. When we return, we will be recapping the season for the New York Jets as Rami Levy and Bilal Powell join me on the game plan. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Well, the Jets season promised to be a good one. Instead, they finished with a 7-10 record. To be fair, they lost their star quarterback Aaron Rodgers on the first drive of the season with no good alternative at QB. I'm sorry, Zach Wilson. They missed the playoffs for the 13th consecutive season, extending the longest active postseason drought in the NFL. To wrap up the Jets season, let's hear from Rami Levy and former Jets running back Bilal Powell from the In-Flight Snack podcast. Guys, how did the Jets bounce back next year?
The New York Jets season essentially ended 4 plays into the season when Aaron Rodgers got hurt. They didn't have a backup plan. They didn't have a backup quarterback. And at that point, the season ended. And yet still, with all the turbulence, with all the drama, with stories coming out in The Athletic that were hit pieces, with everything that happened, they ended the season 7-10, again behind a stellar defense. It could have been a lot worse. They were still third in the AFC East. They need to be a lot better. They need to make improvements on the offensive line, to the backup quarterback position, and to the second wide receiver position. Bilal, what do you see happening for the Jets this offseason to improve, to get over the hump next year and be better than 7-10 with Aaron Rodgers?
Well, we heard it from Woody Johnson's mouth. They didn't have a backup quarterback, and I think that was one of the biggest things that hurt this season, is not having a backup quarterback. I have to disagree that the season was over in 4 plays. It wasn't. They still had time to go out and get a backup quarterback to help this team win the rest of the year. Even after a victory versus Buffalo in week 1, they absolutely have to go get a number 2 receiver to help out Garrett Wilson. Put a veteran on the other side, someone we'll talk about later. But go get a veteran receiver to help out Garrett Wilson, maybe a guy that's solidified and running routes, and use Garrett Wilson more in the deep threat.
Yes, of course. Lesson learned. At this level of the NFL and football, you have to have a good backup quarterback. Even though Zach Wilson, yes, he might have been the 2nd overall pick, just goes to show that these guys sometimes from the draft don't pan out too well. Marcus Mariota also just got cut from the Steelers. So looking for a good backup quarterback it almost remains to be seen whether the Jets are going to go for a decent veteran backup, because how many years after a torn Achilles injury does Aaron Rodgers have left? And now to the other team in New York. The New York Football Giants finished third in the NFC East with a 6-11 record. At one point in the season, it seems like they found the savior in Tommy DeVito, only for him to get benched a couple of games later. It was a rough one. A historically poor offensive line and several injuries plagued the team this year. To wrap up the Giants season, let's hear from Pat Leonard from the Talkin Ball podcast. Pat, what lessons can be learned from the Giants season this year?
Thanks, Courtney. The Giants enter 2024 with their backs against the wall. Year 3 of the Joe Schoen, Brian Daboll regime, and pressure to win now or else. Daboll firmly on the hot seat as head coach, and the GM Schoen possibly as well if things continue to go south. It all started promisingly in 2022. Daboll won Coach of the Year, the Giants made the playoffs, won a road postseason game in Minnesota, and Daniel Jones received a 4-year, $160 million contract extension. But things changed quickly in the NFL. The Giants skidded to a 2-8 start in 2023, and they started 3 different quarterbacks, Jones, Tyrod Taylor, and Tommy DeVito. They did win 3 straight games late in the year, paced by 11 turnovers forced by their defense, but they couldn't even keep that side of the ball intact. Wink Martindale, their defensive coordinator, resigned from Brian Daboll's staff. There was a coaching exodus from the building in East Rutherford as Schoen struggles to get the personnel and the roster together, and Daboll struggles to manage games and his game day sideline. It may all come down to what the Giants do at quarterback. Do they draft one at number 6? Do they bring in a veteran as a stopgap to back up and possibly take over for Jones if he struggles again? Back to you, Courtney.
Well, I have to agree. The Giants offseason will revolve around the quarterback position. Have you heard that before? I think we just said that about the Jets, but it goes for every team that doesn't have a quarterback that can take them to a deep playoff run. This is what the league revolves around now. Daniel Jones got paid millions and millions and millions of dollars to be benched. Whether they bring them back, whether Tommy DeVito resigns, shall remain to be seen. But yes, the quarterback position is very important. The Cleveland Browns finished the 2023 season with an 11-6 record, clinching their first winning season and playoff berth since 2020. Their star QB in Deshaun Watson was hurt for most of the season, but thanks to Joe Flacco, coupled with a great defense, led the team to the AFC wildcard, where they ended up losing to the Texans. To wrap up the Browns season, let's hear from Max Loeb and Eric Metcalf from the Dog Check podcast. Guys, where do the Browns go from here?
Thanks, Courtney. Eric, as the Browns enter the offseason, there's a lot of questions regarding Deshaun Watson, the offense, and specifically an offensive coordinator change in Ken Dorsey. How do you feel about the Browns bringing Dorsey in to maybe tailor to Watson's skill set a little bit more?
You know, I really feel good about it. I mean, he was a Browns player. When he got to Buffalo, Josh Allen wasn't the Josh Allen that we see now. And so I think Dorsey, having that experience with a quarterback who can run as well as throw the ball, can bring that to the Browns and improve on what Deshaun Watson has done as a Cleveland Brown. I think it takes a lot for a quarterback coach who's only been a guy who coached a drop-back guy to really, truly understand what it means to coach a dual-threat guy. And so when he has that knowledge and ability to incorporate everything that he's learned in working with Josh and putting that in instilling that in Deshaun, I think the sky's the limit. And so that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for him to bring that continuity in there that we really didn't have. Because it's like now you have somebody who's been through it with the quarterback and knows how to just implement it in offense.
Yeah, continuity and familiarity, I think, is the name of the game. That's a great point. As we look forward to the Browns offseason, we're fascinated to see what Ken Dorsey does with Deshaun Watson. We appreciate you and your insight, Eric. Back to you, Courtney.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see if Ken Dorsey can turn it around for Deshaun Watson and the Browns offense. But Joe Flacco, comeback player of the year, coming off of the bench, basically on his couch at home, coming to save the Browns and bring them to the playoffs. Their defense is fantastic. Myles Garrett is still at the top of his game. I think the Browns are in good hands. The NFL Draft Combine kicks off on February 26th at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis. So to preview the Combine, let's hear from our Joe DeLeone from the First Team podcast. Joe, what should we expect from the Combine this year?
Thanks, Courtney. The 2024 NFL Scouting Combine kicks off this upcoming Thursday, and a number of guys are going to do well enough to push themselves into either the first round conversation or solidify their draft status as top 10 picks in the 2024 NFL Draft. 5 guys that I think could create the most buzz from the event. First being Jaden Daniels, the quarterback from LSU, who won the Heisman Trophy this past season. He wants to show off, and he will have this opportunity to prove that he belongs in this elite tier of athlete for the quarterback position. Now, his teammate Brian Thomas Jr., one of the LSU wide receivers that are going to be there, will have a ridiculous day in terms of his 40-yard dash at 6'4", 205 pounds. After that, a name that has not been talked about much, that being Tyrese Knight, the UTEP linebacker. He expects to have really good short agility numbers to prove that he is laterally a very quick athlete. I also need to bring up Nate Wiggins, the cornerback from Clemson at 6'2", 185 pounds. He is going to be the most fluid mover in all of the defensive back drills, and assuming he does any of the athletic testing. The last one, a guy that we know is an athletic freak, Cooper DeJean, the Iowa cornerback, 6'2", 207 pounds, could be a dominant player as a slot safety / slot corner, a nickel player. But those are my 5 guys that I'm most excited to see in Indianapolis, where I'll be covering the event for the First Team podcast. Back to you, Courtney.
I agree, Joe. The combine for most players is about solidifying their draft position. Great information. We cannot wait for Indianapolis. Okay, it's time to play Pick 6 on the game plan. This week, we will be discussing the top 6 wide receivers in the NFC with Mike Wahle from the On My Block podcast. Mike, you ready to play Pick 6?
I think so. Let's do it.
Okay, the first up on your list is a personal favorite of mine. Might not be for yours as you cover the Green Bay Packers, but Amon-Ra St. Brown. Why is he the #1 wide receiver in the NFC on your list?
Yeah, because I like guys who are chasing greatness, and that's what Amon-Ra St. Brown does day in and day out. I'm sure he does it every day in the practice field as well. Tied for second in the league in receptions, third in the league in yards, but really, for me, he's one of the toughest guys in the field every time he steps on it. He reminds me of Steve Smith, my old teammate from Carolina, in a lot of ways. The way he takes on not only the passing game, but also what he does in the running game. For me, he's a guy that doesn't take a play off. And when I think about Dan Campbell and the culture and the mentality that they want to add to that really, really talented offense. I mean, best offensive line in the league, ton of skill position players, Jared Goff at quarterback, but he's really the fountainhead, talking about Amon-Ra St. Brown as a guy who they've got to be looking to for leadership at all times, and he delivers week in and week out.
#2, you got CeeDee Lamb. Why is that?
When you watch CeeDee, he's obviously a high-powered offense, great quarterback in Dak Prescott. He's a great route runner, has a full route tree. He's really, really good after the catch. And it reminds me actually of the Detroit Lions game. I think it was like week 15 or 16. But the Detroit Lions defense just put Dallas Cowboys. And sure enough, CeeDee Lamb takes a flat route, breaks a tackle, goes yard. A couple series later, double moves the safety, makes him fall on the ground, almost goes yard again. It just shows you, I think he broke the Cowboys single season receiving yards record that day. It just shows you what kind of talent he has. He's really putting everything together, had a big season, deserves to be on this list, certainly.
#3 is Cooper Kupp. Triple Crown recently, obviously with Matthew Stafford still there. Is there a possibility that Cooper Kupp can still keep up this production that he has been doing for the Rams? He's fantastic.
Yeah, Cooper Kupp, he wins the Triple Crown in 2021. I think he missed 5 games last year. I think he missed 8 games the year before. So when I look at Cooper Kupp, though, the professionalism, the attention to detail, the route running, the explosiveness in and out of the break, and what you love to see about Cooper Kupp is he has a different release and a different setup for each guy. You just tell he's a student of the football game. He loves to prepare. Preparation is the key to victory in this kind of elite level sport. And I don't know if there's anybody who does it better than him.
#4, Justin Jefferson. Although he did miss some time in this past season, there's some questions about who his quarterback will be next year, but he still lands at #4 on your list. Why is that?
Well, because it was like 2 ships in the night, like you said. He only played in 10 games last year. I think only 5 of those were with Kirk Cousins. So the thing that it jumps off the field for me, elite confidence, elite hands, elite route running, and he wants to be the best. He talks about being the best, and he works to be the best. You got to respect that. I don't know if he's the most athletic receiver in the National Football League or the NFC, but he's certainly one of those guys who's bringing his A game week in and week out. And again, preparation goes a long way for me.
#5, a man that could possibly be on another team as we enter free agency, Mike Evans, the touchdown machine.
Yeah, 13 touchdowns this year, and I've watched him live a couple times. he's on an average, a pedestrian offense by, NFL standards. He doesn't have the quarterback with the cachet that a Jared Goff or a Dak Prescott, some of the other guys on this list. So he's going to get bracket coverage all the time. He's getting he's the focal point of their offense. And he still is, with his catch radius, his route tree, his size, his speed, his separation ability, the dog that he has in him, he just continues to make plays for Baker Mayfield and the Bucs offense. I think the only guy to ever start his career with 10 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons. He can do it all. He can catch balls in traffic. He's just so much fun to watch. You love the big physical receiver.
Speaking of big physical receivers, the last one on our list. There's no one. Would you walk into a draft interview and take your shirt off? I'm talking about DK Metcalf here of the Seattle Seahawks. Geno Smith possibly going to stay. Physically intimidating wide receiver along with his quarterback. Why did he land at number 6 on your list?
I think there's a couple guys. Puka could be here. You could say A.J. Brown could be here. But really, I think DK Metcalf is the most physically intimidating receiver in the entire National Football League, not just the NFC. He's got track speed at 6'5", 240. I think he hit the NFL's highest mark last year, like 22.2 miles an hour in a game. Those are video game numbers.
Yeah.
So when you look at this guy, there's some things that he can shore up. He can expand his route tree. He can certainly work on his kind of off-season professionalism. He's talking about eating candy bars all the time to get that physique. So maybe we can do some of this stuff off the field. But when you look at just a guy that a defensive back does not want to see, you talk about Deron Bland lining up against DK Metcalf and having the kind of game that DK had against him and then some other guys, really good players in this league. It's just hard to keep him off this list.
Thank you so much, Mike, for all of this information. We will talk to you soon.
Thank you very much.
That's all the time we have on the game plan today. Go check out the Believe Podcast Network for more in-depth analysis on every team in the league. And we'll see you next week as we continue to prepare for the NFL Draft.